That's great. That's positive from a financial and a market perspective, even export perspective. But it came with a cost, an environmental cost. I'm not going to describe all the issues that we are dealing with this plan, the Cerrado national plan, but one of them is very important for the discussion we are having here. We don't know exactly how much the UK embassy is supporting us in some of these, but probably we have an area the size of probably Spain, already open and degraded land in the Cerrado alone of Brazil. That's a lot of land. So the goal now, according to this plan and to all negotiations we are having and putting in place several other instruments, is no longer, as we are doing for the Amazon, is no longer to increase new deforestation or new expansion of agriculture in the savannas, but to reutilize those degraded lands. That's crucially important. WRI has a lot of experience doing this in Indonesia, Southeast Asia, and actually we want to borrow some of that expertise to Brazil. And that's a commitment already from the policy arena, because I'm convinced, and also looking at what the private sector, the agribusiness sector, is already achieving in terms of improving productivity in the Cerrado savannas of Brazil in several places. This has to be the norm instead of the exception. And I believe that if you work together with academia, partners, several ministerials, and the private sector and the financial sector, we are going to be able to design and build a new business plan for reutilize degraded land for the Cerrado savannas in Brazil. It's part of the plan. Actually, we are putting some of these mechanisms already in place. And then come this. So this is part of the national policy. Let's look at the biomes, at the ecosystems, where most of our emissions come from deforestation. We also have what we call the sector plans. Some are already in place. The ambassador just mentioned the low carbon agriculture. We have an energy efficiency plan. We have a charcoal production plan. Those are running already according to the Brazilian climate change law. Just 2 days ago, the Minister of Environment of Brazil launched the public consultations for 4 new plans. They are already open for everybody to participate, to contribute, to make criticism, to bring new ideas to those plans. They are already running together with the Brazilian Forum for Climate Change. We are going to be doing by the internet, but also in meetings, gatherings like this all over Brazil. We are putting for public consultation the industry plan, the mining plan, the transportation sector plan, and the health and adaptation type of plan. So everybody is more than welcome to come and contribute and participate. With the Minister of Finance, we have a particular group in Brasilia, several ministers working together to design and kind of a structure, start to structure the Brazilian market for emissions reduction. And we have all the fundings. We have the Amazon Fund, we have the Climate Change Fund, we have the Low Carbon Agriculture Credit Line coming from Banco do Brasil, BNDES, and other institutions. Pardon me. In support, the fund is in support of all this big effort of the biomes and sector plans. Why am I saying? I'm saying, oh, there's one more thing. There is also a working group that's led by the Minister of Environment on how we need numbers. We need to produce estimates. We need to produce methodology. We need to train people. We need to gain capacity on all those areas. There is a working group led by the Minister of Environment, but also with the participation of science, technology, finance, and several others on, we need, according to the law, it's a mandatory, it's a requirement. We are working already on that to produce Brazilian annual estimates on emissions of greenhouse gases. And this is all point to the GHG protocol. As the ambassador just mentioned, the Minister of Environment is a partner since the beginning, since 2008. Several big companies already are participating in the program, using the methodology, but also doing the reporting. They represent a big chunk of the Brazilian industry, also a significant part of the emissions. I was glad to see in the program that I believe the next speaker, I believe, is going to be talking about cities. There is another, if you go to Brazil, there's a lot of committees, but anyway. There is another a special committee for the World Cup. We participate in that. Not only the Ministry of Environment, there's several ministries working together on how to make a low-carbon World Cup in the 14 cities that are going to be, the places for the soccer major games in Brazil in 2014. If I'm not wrong, WRI and GHG protocol are already working on Rio and São Paulo city, on devising, providing technical assistance to Rio and São Paulo, and I believe São Paulo is going to be a kind of a pilot for this, right? They're going to be talking a little more about this. But talking to my team today in Brasilia, and they mentioned, listen, this committee from the policy side that's working for the World Cup cities decided recently to adopt the GHG protocol to develop detailed accounting of emissions for the event and how to produce, provide guidance for emissions reduction and compensation for this big event. I think it's a really a major significant step. To sum up, I believe it's a bold decision that the Brazilian government decided to take. But this is going to be able to, we are going to be able to accomplish that only if the society comes and works together with us. Partners, academia, civil society, private sector, etc. And actually, I would like to propose to WRI and GHG Protocol to come and talk to us, discuss with this special committee that is producing the methodologies and discussing the numbers about the Brazilian emissions. I think we should start, let's talk about an agenda together. Actually, I'm going to be talking to Raquel Biederman soon about this. I hope I can stay till the end of this session, but in a nutshell, in a very broad kind of paintbrush of what's going on, I would say people asked me recently, would you believe that Brazil would reduce deforestation in the Amazon? If they asked me this question 5 years ago, I would say no. But today, Brazil is showing that it is doable, it is possible, and if you do this integrated movement using the best knowledge, the best science available, and developing good methodologies, we can do it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Secretary, for your commitment and your energy that you bring to this issue and your partnership. And we certainly would love to sit down and talk about this more and see how our tools and our technical knowledge can be supportive of the goals that you are trying to achieve. Thank you very much. We wanted to take a moment to go into depth about what is this project going to be doing. And for that, we have two of our greenhouse gas protocol experts here. Kaylee Robinson and Wei-Kane Fang are going to walk us through it. So Kaylee, why don't I hand it over to you? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we get the slide changed and the first presentation? Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you especially to Carlos Klink and the Brazilian Ministry for being here. We really appreciate it. And also thank you to the British Embassy as well for your generous support in allowing the GHG Protocol and World Resources Institute to continue providing the standards and tools for businesses and policymakers. As Jennifer said, my name's Kaylee Robinson. I've worked with the GHG Protocol and World Resources Institute for several years now. I currently lead our international training and capacity building work. But prior to that, for my first 2 years at WRI, I actually worked with the Brazil GHG Protocol team. So I had the great opportunity to be working on this program that we're talking about that was generously supported by the British Embassy in a partnership with the Ministry for the Environment and some of our other local partners who are here today, the Getulio Vargas Foundation as well. So it's great to be back here in Brazil, and I'm really happy to be here today. So we'll go ahead and start talking about these standards that we've been talking about. I will first give an overview of what is the GHG protocol and what do we do. And then I'll talk about what standards and tools we have available for businesses. And then I'll pass it over to my colleague, Fong, who will talk about standards and tools that we have available for policymakers. So what is the Greenhouse Gas Protocol? The Greenhouse Gas Protocol was launched back in 1998 as a partnership between the World Resources Institute and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. It's not just those two organizations that work on our standards. We actually bring really all the players who are interested in coming to the table. We bring them to the table to develop standards. So we're talking about businesses and NGOs, civil society, governments, and all kinds of organizations to contribute to the development of our standards so that we get the most use out of the standard, and it's really addressing the needs of the people who will actually be using the standards. Our vision is to empower the world to avoid and respond to climate change through the wide use of internationally accepted standards and practices. So the way that we develop these standards is bringing everyone to the table in an inclusive, international, and balanced stakeholder process. And then once we develop those standards, which oftentimes can take a couple of years just because so much goes into those standards, after we've developed standards, we make them freely available to anyone, as well as the tools that go along with those standards that help companies and other organizations actually calculate their emissions. And altogether, that full suite of standards and tools really provides the foundation for sustainable climate strategies. So we have over 4 major standards currently, and today I'll be talking about our new standards as well. We have over 25 calculation tools available, again, to anyone who wants to use them through our website. We reach over 55,000 people through our registered website users alone, and have further reached beyond that through GHG Protocol and other GHG programs worldwide. So our first standard, which I won't be talking about too much today, but it really provides the foundation for all of our other standards. Oops, wrong room, I guess. So it provides the foundation, and that standard was the corporate standard, which is a guide or kind of an instruction document for companies and other organizations to get a full picture of all of their GHG emissions and to then report those emissions. We launched that first standard back in 2001, and since then we've had very widespread adoption. So as Manish had said, if you were here for the first session, currently over 60% of the global Fortune 500 companies use the GHG Protocol corporate standard to account for their emissions. So these are just some of the companies that report using our standard. Additionally, programs and initiatives around the world are based on our standards. So here in this map, all the countries that are in gray have either significant corporate adoption of our standards, or there's local initiatives based on our standard. In addition to that, there's several well-known, highly recognized programs that are also based on our standards, including the EU ETS is based on some GHG protocol calculation tools. The Climate Registry is also based on our standards, and others as well. And then in addition to those programs, the GHG protocol also has our own local initiatives in several countries, including China, India, Mexico, and Brazil. And since I'm in Brazil, I'll give you a little bit more of an idea of the Brazil GHG Protocol program, which was also already well explained. So that program started back in 2008 as a partnership between the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, the local branch of the Business Council for Sustainable Development, or SEBEDES, the Ministry of the Environment of Brazil, as well as the Getulio Vargas Foundation. And that program has been very successful in the years that we've been operating. We have currently over 75 of Brazil's top companies reporting their greenhouse gas emissions to the program. And just some of our founding members, this is not all the companies that report, but you can see that these are Brazil's top and most well-known companies that are reporting to us. And as the ambassador said, last year alone, the program accounted for 20% of Brazil's total emissions, excluding the emissions from deforestation. So it really is really getting at a significant portion of the emissions. And I think we're talking about excluding deforestation and land use change emissions. This is further pointing to the need for this agricultural protocol that I'll be getting to right now. So the agricultural protocol is a new protocol or a new guidance that the GHG protocol is developing to meet this need that has not yet been addressed. Currently, agriculture accounts for 10% of all global emissions, and that number is only expected to increase by 50% by 2030. And while there's many companies throughout the world that are taking action on climate change, there's there's thousands of companies that are already reporting greenhouse gas inventories. A very high proportion, though, of those emissions does come from agriculture, and there currently is no international methodology or standard for those companies to know how to properly account for and report their emissions. So for the last 2 years, the GHG protocol has been working on addressing that gap. We've been working to develop an agricultural guidance that will be based on our decade-old corporate standard for generally for all sector companies, and it'll specifically address the agricultural sector. And that's going to be looking again at the company level, so at the entity level, and it'll be able to be used by companies in any country. And it'll be for large agricultural or horticultural producers of pretty much all agricultural products, so fruits, grains, vegetables, and livestock as well, which again is an important issue in Brazil. And the focus will be for sources on the farm. So you're thinking of energy that's used in farm machinery, manure management, the carbon that's captured in the soils, and so forth. The guidance is very important because it's going to meet some overall objectives. Specifically, it'll help these agricultural companies to identify and prioritize areas where they can get the most reductions throughout their company. And then it'll also help them set targets to reduce their emissions and then track their progress towards reaching those reduction targets. And then once these agricultural companies have taken these positive steps and are working towards reducing their emissions, the protocol will give them a guideline on how they can communicate those successes to the public, so whether that's to the stakeholders or civil society or to their own consumers. And some other key issues that this protocol will address that really have not been addressed by any other methodologies out there are the highly variable emissions rates over time. So even just on one farm, emissions can vary wildly, from one year to the next because of droughts or flooding or heat waves. So this protocol will help farmers address that and how they can manage and track their emissions over time. There's also a high degree of calculation uncertainty in the ag sector because of all the biological processes that underpin, the livestock production and the carbon in the soils. So this protocol will also address that. And finally, we'll talk about accounting for emissions from sequestered carbon. So that's the carbon that's fixated in the soil, and the different kind of practices that farms can put in place that will reduce their emissions over time. And so our protocol will address that timing issue. And then, as the ambassador said, in addition to the global standard that we're developing, we're also working with Brazilian stakeholders and companies and organizations to also make sure that our standard is also very applicable to Brazil, to the Brazilian context. And then we'll be working with Brazilian companies to build capacity and do their first inventories as well. So that was the agriculture protocol that we'll be launching in the future shortly. And I'd also like to talk to you about our value chain standards. We just launched 2 new standards back in September of 2011, including our product standard and our Scope 3, or value chain standard. And before I get into the specifics of those, I was going to show a brief video to explain the process by which we developed that standard, the objectives of the standard, and the impacts that we hope to have with that standard as well. So can we play the video?
For me, sustainability means health for all.
Constructive, responsible change.
Balancing the different aspects, ecological aspects, economic aspects and social aspects.
Being responsible and careful with natural resources.
People, planet, and products.
It's more of a journey than a destination.
In one word, it means the future.
The Greenhouse Gas Protocol is a long-standing partnership that we've had between the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and the World Resources Institute. We've been partnered for over 12 years to develop standards for business to measure and report their greenhouse gas emissions.
It was pretty clear to me 14 years ago that we weren't going to make much progress moving business on climate change until there was a sort of credible methodology for them to measure their emissions. You know, the old adage, you can't manage what you can't measure.
What stood out was the amount of participants from a wide variety of aspects, engineering, business, from all over the world. And so what you're left with there is not the work of a few, but the work of many.
We engaged over 2,300 participants in 55 countries over 3 years. That by having a global multi-stakeholder process, it really improved the quality, the rigor, the credibility of the standard.
It'll help us measure each product. It'll help us target where there are high levels of emissions that we can then work with our suppliers to reduce.
It allows for better transparency and understanding of the data, and the common measurements allow us to talk to the public and to our supply chain in more of a common language.
From a value chain standpoint, it also helps us to work with our suppliers, to partner with our suppliers to actually bring about reductions. And in the end, the practical application of these standards, that's what it's about. They give us credibility when we talk both internally and externally about greenhouse gas emissions associated with our products.
The Greenhouse Gas Protocol gives a good framework, and it just gives us the basis for really reducing the risks and being able to catch the opportunities.
They allow companies to take a better look at where really material sources of emissions are. Perhaps a retailer, it's really in their supply chain, very significant emissions they should be measuring and reducing. For another sector, perhaps like a car manufacturer, it's really about the product use and disposal.
We've looked at milk, and the real problem is all in the cow. It's all about methane. So what have we done? We've gone away and invested more money in scientific research to understand how to reduce those emissions. We're also working with our farmers to get a really precise understanding on the farm of where emissions are arising for them.
It really is a tool that allows for practical implementation of those reduction efforts. So you can focus your company resources, focus the time and efforts that you put in your sustainability programs to truly bring about reductions.
How do you become more efficient in the use of energy, in the use of raw materials? I think the impact of these standards will be that in the near future, companies all over the world will start using these standards to plan their strategies and reduce emissions effectively.
Measurement is not the end game, it's the measurement that leads to management, that leads to reduction, that's really critical for business and society.
There is opportunities to reduce costs, there's opportunities to innovate. And we're already seeing from dozens of the companies that road tested the standards, them starting to act on what they found. And that is incredibly encouraging.
So that was an overview of the standards, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail before I pass it over to my colleague Fong. So talking first about the Scope 3 standard. So the Scope 3 standard gives a company a picture of its emissions beyond just the emissions that are directly under its control, which would be those Scope 1 emissions in the middle, or it's Scope 2 emissions, which are those from purchased electricity. So our new standard allows companies to look up and down the value chain at its upstream products and services that it purchases or acquires from other companies, as well as downstream to the products and services that it sells to consumers, other companies, etc. So we've divided those up into 15 categories that helps companies analyze where the hot spots where the most of their emissions might lie. And companies are often very surprised. We had 60 companies road test our standards before we launched them, and they found that on average 79% of their total emissions came from their Scope 3 emissions. So this standard has been very important for companies. Now there's many business objectives of doing an inventory, but IKEA is one of our road testers, and they specifically found that most of their emissions, I'm not sure why this isn't working, the majority of their emissions came from the use of sold products, and so they're putting in projects that are directly targeting the efficiency of their products in order to decrease their total emissions over the long term. And then finally, our product standard focuses on just one product, taking it through its entire life cycle. So from cradle all the way to grave. So when it's first extracted from the ground as natural materials, all the way through when it's thrown out or recycled into another product. And this will help companies assess the emissions throughout that life cycle. And we had another road tester found, after they did a life cycle assessment for 9 products, they found that while they thought the most emissions would come from the beverage processing, it actually came from the packaging and refrigeration. And so now that they know that, they're able to really target those emissions by working with their suppliers on more efficient refrigeration and other aspects of their supply chain. I'll skip this slide. And we've already had, as Manish said in the video, we've already had some great outcomes, including launching these standards globally, as well as being adopted by major programs. And being called one of the top corporate sustainability trends to watch in 2012 by Fast Company. And we really hope to make further impacts and have product and Scope 3 standard reporting and accounting be common practice for businesses in the next 3 to 5 years. So I'm going to now pass over the microphone to my colleague Fong, who will be talking about the tools and standards that the GHG Protocol is developing for policymakers.
I know it's late Sunday afternoon, so this is the last presentation, and I'll make it brief. And I know since 1:30 just now, we have been talking about businesses. So now we try. Now let's slightly change our perspective. That I'm going to introduce 2 standards that we are developing now that focus on helping the decision makers to make good decision for sustainability. So these are the 2 standards that we are developing now. So we call it mitigation accounting guidelines, and the other one is a citywide greenhouse gas accounting standard. So as you can see from the slide, so the main target audience is a decision maker. So for the mitigation accounting guidelines, it focuses on the national governments and the sub-national governments. Whereas for the citywide standard, of course, the target audience is the city governments. Okay, firstly, let's see the mitigation accounting. Oops. So when we talk about mitigation accounting, so firstly, we need to divide it into 2 parts. So one, we call it goal accounting, and the other one is mitigation action accounting. So what do we mean by mitigation goal and mitigation action? Okay, mitigation goal. So you can see that there are 2 types of goal, basically. One is absolute goal, and the other one is based on BAU. Normally we call BAU is business as usual goal. So as you can see from the slides, that there are many countries and regions have already established a goal. For example, Australia has an absolute goal of 80% below 2000 levels by 2050. And for the BAU, for example, like Brazil is between 36 and 38% below BAU by 2020. So these are the differences between absolute goal and BAU. So the other one is what is mitigation action. So as you can see here, there are a lot of mitigations countries and cities and regions have been implementing. For example, the most well-known one probably is the EU ETS, the emission trading scheme, as well as a lot of like low carbon transportation and so on. These are the mitigation actions. So what the decision makers need to know on these mitigation actions and the mitigation goal. So firstly, the decision makers would like to know what will be the possible energy or greenhouse gas emissions can be achieved through these actions. And after implemented these mitigation actions, then they would like to know how much they have achieved, how much the reduction they have achieved. So these are the two main purposes of developing these standards. So we are helping the decision makers to quantify this and to track progress against their goal, whether it's absolute goal or BAU. So the problem here, currently there's no harmonized standard for it. That's why we were working on it. And so this is a bit detailed, but a bit technical. But just to briefly to explain that there are two types of accounting. So when we talk about like absolute goal and about absolute goal, then actually what we are doing is like national inventory. So it's accounting of the emission within a specific period of time. So that is the emission. And for the BAU goal and the mitigation action, in fact, it's an accounting of the reductions or over time. So it's not for that specific years. So a lot of time you see the graph of like BAU, this trend, and this is the current trend. So it's the different is about trend. So what we are going to develop here is to develop a framework that provides overarching principles, concepts, and procedure for accounting this greenhouse gas reduction. And it's voluntary and it's policy neutral. So it's not related to the climate negotiation. What we are going to do is to help the decision makers to quantify their reduction. Okay, so after talking about the mitigation action accounting, so next we're going to talk about cities. And the speaker just now was mentioning about cities. And in fact, if you were here earlier, so you heard about the urbanizations and so on. So it's a hot topic now. So let's see why we focus on cities. So if you look at the data, so over 70% of the global CO2 emissions is from cities. And look at this graph. It shows how the growth of the megacities around the world. You see the graph on the left. You see the number of those cities with population from 1 million to 5 million has grown from less than 50 years ago to now almost 400 cities. And the mega cities with over 10 million people, now there are 20 over cities. And you see this map, you can see the red dots, those mega cities with population growth rate of over 5%. So you can see there are more and more and more mega cities coming up around the world, especially in Asia and in Africa. So what is the role of conducting greenhouse gas inventories for cities? You can see this is the cycle of low carbon city planning. So normally we start with establishing the baseline emission. Then we produce we set the target and we formulate action plan. We implement. Then we track emissions. So this is way the standard comes. So it helps cities to set their best year emission and to track their progress over years. So in this initiative, WI is working or is partnering with the C40 cities and equally to develop this standard. And we have endorsement from the World Bank, the UN Habitat, as well as World Bank, UNEP, and UN Habitat. Oops. In fact, last month in Bonn on 14th of May, we just released the pilot version of the standard. We call it Global Protocol for Community Scale Greenhouse Gas Emission, or in short GPC. And so now I would like to tell you a little bit more about what it all about this city standard. So I guess many of you are familiar that we normally divide the emissions into Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. So, and in this global protocol, we have another category of, on top of Scope 1, 2, and 3, we have a basic plus, and expanded. The reason is that in the current practice, we normally only include, or the minimum requirement is to include Scope 1 and Scope 2. But in fact, for cities, we try to include even more indirect emissions than even for the basic category. For the case of company, there are different ways of drawing the boundary. So, and for the case of city, so I don't know how familiar are you with the greenhouse gas protocol. So just try to illustrate to you what does it mean by direct emission and indirect emission. So you see the red dotted box. So just imagine that is the geographic boundary of the city. So the emissions from the houses, from the offices, from the factories in the cities, we call it Scope 1. And many cities around the world purchase electricity from outside, from the country or from other cities. So the emission from these power plants is called Scope 2. And not all the cities produce agriculture, or so a lot. So they purchase agricultural producers from outside the city, bring to the city for processes and consumption. Then the waste produced will be transported outside from the city for disposal. So emissions from these activities are called Scope 3 activities. And they're upstream and downstream. And I will not go into detail. And this is an overview of the direct emissions and indirect emissions from cities. So this addresses a lot of concerns that we heard about. Cities is the center of demand, center of consumption. So we look at it comprehensively. Oops. And this is the reporting framework that we have, and it's still in a draft format. So you're welcome to give us comment, and everything is on our website. So I will not go into detail. And this just illustrates what do we have in the or the requirements for the reporting. We have basic plus, and basic plus, and expanded. And finally, this is about the project phasing. So the project is divided into two phases. So right now we are focusing on basic, that includes mostly direct emissions and some indirect emissions like waste sector and transport sector. And in the coming months, we are going to pilot test it in cities around the world, including like Sao Paulo, just I mentioned. And starting next year, we are going to expanding the standard into Scope 3. So as I said, we pilot test the standard in many cities around the world, and just to mention that Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro are among the pilot cities that we already confirmed and we're going to do. And in fact, this time of the year, last year, I was here. I was working together with COPE, Professor Emilio was here. So we're working together to improve and review and improve the inventory report, the greenhouse gas inventory for the city of Rio. And so I'm proud to be here again. This not summer, is winter here, and I'm looking forward to continue work together with Brazilian cities to pilot test these standards. And yeah, you're all welcome to participate in our initiative. So we have a few different stakeholder groups like advisory committee, technical working groups, review groups, and pilot cities. So you are welcome to join our initiative by participating in different stakeholder groups. And this slide gives an overview of when will these 3 standards be ready. So basically, the agriculture protocol will be ready by the end of this year, and the policy accounting or mitigation accounting and citywide accounting will be ready by the end of next year. And yeah, this slide gives the contact information for myself and for Kelly, and we have our website here. So please visit our website and contact us if you have any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And what I'm going to suggest is those of you who have questions for Kaylee and for Fong, that they'll be here to discuss that with you, because I know that both the ambassador and the secretary, well, first of all, thank you for spending this time with us. It was just fantastic to have you here. As you see, the greenhouse gas protocol is only as strong as its partners. And so we're just very grateful to have both of you as partners and look forward to continuing to work with you. I mean, we're here to provide these tools for what you are trying to do. In the end, it's about emission reductions. We provide the tools, but hopefully through seeing the decision-making, the transparency, then both companies and cities and states and countries can take further action. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Please stay and have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you.